One of the things that has come up a lot recently in a lot of my videos is a word called SEND, which is special needs and disability education. And it is, well, it is that. It is the money that local councils use to give support, need, or anything that they can to help kids with their special needs education that they might need, be it things like, I don't know, autism, language, you name it. It's there for them should they need it. And one of the big things that has been really noticed over the past couple of years is now the increased ever need for SEND, and the demand for those services has risen exponentially over the past couple of years. More interestingly, of course, a lot of people well, we said it back, of course, during 2020. How were a lot of kids going to cope with COVID, the fallout from that, and what happened during that time? This has led to, again, not surprisingly, a rise in the demand for SEND services. So this is yet another area that is really important, but is going to create a massive problem. And I think this really factors in now to a larger scope and a larger conversation that needs to be had of how do we fund local councils? Because it is becoming increasingly clear that after austerity, where councils had their budgets, in many cases, cut by up to like 18% in some cases, and the poorest councils, even more shockingly, had theirs cut by up to 26%. And those were the most poorest councils because that's where the most demand was for a lot of those services. So we are now seeing almost in many ways the chickens of austerity beginning, well, the eggs, shall we say, laid by the eggs of austerity. The austerity eggs are now really beginning to hatch. So it is inevitable that we are now starting to see a lot of crises. Obviously, we've been in a housing crisis for, well, quite some time. You're seeing massive areas of underinvestment now once again coming home to roost. And of course, SEND is one of those areas where we are seeing a potential crisis in many ways about to erupt. So how, again, our current government is going to solve this, the fact that we now have at least a far more sensible form of government in charge is at least a relief, shall we say. But again, this is a challenge that would be very difficult to combat for any government trying to tackle this. And you are about to see just how difficult this challenge really is for a lot of councils, and many of them are facing almost complete and utter bankruptcy. And this isn't just like one council we're talking about, as you'll see in a moment. We are talking hundreds because of this. So before we do go into this, please remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button down below. Of course, there are links to my Patreon page, the One Off Donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, well, buy me coffee, the YouTube thank you button, and of course, as always, there's the YouTube membership button down below as well. So thank you very much to all those people who do help and support the channel that way. So let's crack on then into this, he said, with the egg puns. Anyway, this comes from the Guardian with the title of "Councils Now in England Warn of Mass Bankruptcies as SEND Deficits Soar." So council leaders in England have now warned that multi-million-pound deficits now from years of overspending on special needs has now become a burning platform, which could push scores of councils now into bankruptcy within months. They say that now time is running out to now rapidly resolve growing shortfalls that are concerning. Now, the government has given no indication in Wednesday's spending review of how it will deal with now SEND debts, which are expected to exceed over £5 billion by next March. Official figures show a sharp rise in the number of children receiving special needs support in England, along now with an increase in tribunal cases, brought by parents challenging council's refusal of SEND provision for their children. Again, it is this one that is the big one. And again, I'm not saying that these parents are wrong. I think they're entirely right to do that. But why are these councils, or why are these parents sort of forced to do that? Well, it's because these councils have just had less and less and less budget with an increasing more demand, and they have had to make these decisions. I'm not saying that they're right or they've been justified, but this is just where they've been put. And this is a increasing problem. And as I said, this is austerity coming home to roost at the end of the day. So ministers, of course, did confirm on Wednesday that they will publish a school's white paper in the autumn. Parents, of course, fear that the measures now to be outlined will reduce eligibility for some forms of SEND support, including education, health, and care plans. The EHC, the Education, Health and Care Plans, give children and young people up to the age of 25 the legal right to support now from local authorities for conditions such as the autism spectrum disorder, social, environmental, and mental health needs, including attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and speech, language, and communication needs. So, again, wide range of issues that do need help from, these kids need help and they need to be given that help. And it is an increasing problem of what resources there are available, the demand that there is, and spending. And as you can see here, in many cases, there is an overspend because of the demand that is required by this. And I think some of this, even though, again, there's nothing to say it, I think this might be down to down to COVID. I really do think that during the COVID years, a lot of kids went very, very neglected, because of, in many ways, almost like a year, if not more, being out of school, out of social circles, all kinds of stuff. I think this has allowed a lot of things to really fester under the surface. And again, it's a big problem. And I think it's honestly, in a case of this, it's often difficult to say, yeah, money is the problem, or lack of money is a problem. But maybe we do need to have a look at this and how, once again, stuff like this gets funded, how local councils get funded. That's where I think maybe we should be really looking at this, because it's not just things like SEND, it's adult social care that also needs doing. We're also hearing from a lot of recently adult learning centers, for example. Adult education also took a big hit in Wednesday's spending review. That is also going to take a big consequences down the line in that area. But it's not good. It's not good. And like I say, this is a massive challenge. So the councils do, of course, fear that the white paper will not now immediately, of course, show the rapid increase in SEND spending in recent years. The Guardian investigation back in March did reveal that accrued SEND deficits would rise by over 54% for the coming year to more than 5.2 billion. At least 15 councils have accumulated, and this is where it gets kind of shocking, have accumulated SEND deficits exceeding £100 million by next March. That is a lot of money. But again, it's just the sheer demand for these services. And what happens if a council can't do that? Then what ends up happening, they get taken to court by the parents. That their money that they have elsewhere in the council then gets, you can see the vicious cycle here. There's a very vicious cycle that goes on here. The council can't provide services, it can get sued by, in this case, by the parents, which means then it has to have money from somewhere else, which then causes problems elsewhere within the council. You can see the very vicious cycle. Again, Birmingham. What happened in Birmingham? Sued for hundreds of unequal pay disputes that went on there that led it now into bankruptcy, which is again causing big problems now in Birmingham with other areas of services that the council provides. So, the accounting measure, of course, known as a statutory override, has allowed councils to keep the accrued debts now off their balance sheets. This override is due to end on the 31st of March, leaving large numbers of council now effectively insolvent. Councils, of course, declaring effective bankruptcy would, of course, affect all areas of provision, shed hundreds of jobs, and force them now to sell off assets such as buildings and land. Tim Oliver, the chair of the council's network, said that the mounting send service deficits are now a burning platform for many local authorities that are yet there was now no resolution in the spending review. We are 9 months away now from a financial cliff edge where these multi-billion deficits are now placed on councils' budget books, potentially rendering half of England's county and unitary councils insolvent overnight. Again, huge concern right there if that happens, because as you said, if they're forced into insolvency, that's job losses affecting other service areas, having to sell off land, buildings. That has consequences further down the line for a council. The Chartered Institute now for Public Finance and Accountability said that the uncertainty now over the deficit sounded seriously undermined councils' financial planning, leaving them now potentially unable to meet their legal obligations to set the balanced budget. The CIFA spokesperson said the government now continues to leave local authorities in the dark about the future now of the SEND system and their financial stability. By the time ministers can provide clarity on the statutory override, councils will now already be well into their budget setting processes. Nearly 1 in 5 pupils in England have special needs, according to now figures published by the Department of Education, including 482,000 children with education health needs and learning plans, an increase of just 11% in just 12 months. A further 1.28 million pupils do require special needs support without having a current plan, meaning there are now a total of 1.7 million pupils with special needs. Obviously, as you can see, how do we fund this stuff? And it's not a case of how do you fund this stuff, it's how then does this funding get spent? Some councils may need more send funding than others. You know, there is, I think, big questions asked. I think we are coming to a point, I have really sort of said this before, I think we are coming to a point where we really have to look and ask questions of, is local government fit for purpose as it is? What can we do to help to improve it? Can we help do other things in this case? You know, what can we do? Do we need a national inquiry into this? Do we need to have a look at this? Do we need to do something about this? Because it does seem to be a point of this. A large part of this is austerity. Let's not lie. A large part of this is austerity. The council budgets have been slashed and slashed and slashed, told to do more with less. And eventually, there was always going to come a breaking point in all these services. The Conservatives managed to dodge all that accountability, and now things like this are happening in these local authorities. They're not the ones in power. Ultimately, they're not going to be the ones to blame. It is the current government that is in charge. They are, have to solve this problem. How they solve this problem, we wait and see, of course. But hey, the current government is a lot more sensible, a lot more, shall we say, adults in the room, shall we say, than the previous government, which again, I'm glad about. But this is a difficult problem to solve, a very difficult problem to solve. But anyway, let's finish this off. Separate figures do also show that parents now are engaging in legal battles with councils over the plans now in record numbers. The Ministry of Justice said that there are over 23,000 appeals over these plans, which were now received by the courts in the year of March up to March, a 36% annual increase. Hampshire Council said, which is now England's largest cumulative send deficit, projected to be 312 million by the end of March, said now it will be forced to declare effective bankruptcy if no solution to the deficit is now forthcoming. Bournemouth, Christchurch, and Poole councils, which also now have a projected send deficit of £165,000, said that it had taken out a £57 million loan to try and ensure it could cover the rising demand for send services this year. Unless the government actually tells us very soon how it will deal with this historic send deficits, we are going to have to issue a Section 114 notice, an effective declaration of bankruptcy, said the BCP cabinet member for finance. Penny Carpenter, the member of Children's Services at Norfolk County Council, which is a projected deficit of 183 million, said that lack of clarity and assurance on the future of funding is now deeply frustrating. The current financial pressures now are unsustainable, and they severely hinder our ability now to plan effectively. The Department of Education responded to this, saying the government now inherited a SEND system now left on its knees, which again, it did. We aren't doubting that. They absolutely did inherit that. They've inherited a very bad position in a whole number of areas, but they are now responsible for it. You know, you are now responsible. You now have to start looking ways how you can improve the situation. And that ultimately, as we always said right from the very beginning, is their challenge. You know, the hard work started immediately. Starmer was right when he said that. So back to this, which is why now they are currently looking now for changes to improve support for children and trying to stop parents having to fight now for help while bringing about financial stability for councils. We are already making the progress by investing over £1 billion into SEND and 740 million now to create more specialist places in mainstream schools while expanding support for early speech and language needs and neurodivergent children. We'll, of course, set out full plans now for reform, including our approach to supporting councils with their historic deficits in our white paper in the autumn, and this will deliver excellence everywhere for every child. And, of course, as the council said, autumn might be well too late. But, unfortunately, you know, if there's one thing you really learn about national government, it can sometimes move at a glacial pace, whereas local councils can be a lot more quick and flexible about it, but they need that now and done right there and then. It is something that they need desperately to sort out, but it's going to be difficult, you know, and it is not the only service support out there of councils that need doing it. You know, social care, another massive drain on a lot of councils' budgets. But again, something else the government needs to tackle. And if you look at how the winter fuel allowance went, I fully agree that this U-turn, I do not agree with this U-turn. Starmer should have stuck to his guns. It should have been kept as a means test because there are pensioners in receiving of that allowance who really do not need it. Who really do not need it. You know, they do not need it. Now, are there pensioners who need it? Absolutely. But there are a lot of pensioners who receive that every year and go, great, that's an extra 200 quid in my pocket, and doesn't go on their heating. You know, that money could have saved by doing that, could have gone into SEND. There is a lot of other stuff I think that's going to need doing, and I think this government is going to have to make some very difficult decisions. Like it or not, just the position they have been put in. But it's not an excuse. It's just the fact of the reality where they are. But how they deal with these problems is ultimately how they will be judged. So, as always, let me know what you think down below. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.